You have 10 days to remove that animal or face daily fines. Karen Beckley didn't bother to hide the satisfaction curling her lips as she handed me the violation notice. The HOA letterhead gleamed like some kind of badge of authority, but all I saw was a woman clinging to power with manicured claws. It's already been voted on. Ridgegate Greens will be dog-free by the end of the quarter, she added, voice smooth as glass, brittle as hell. I kept my eyes on hers and said evenly, Tango's a retired military K-9. His federal classification hasn't been rescinded. Technically, you're issuing a citation against a government asset. Her face twitched. It was small, a flicker just under the eye, but it was enough. I'd landed a hit. She turned with a hum, heels tapping down my stone walkway like she owned the land beneath them. Tango didn't move. He sat beside me on the porch like a statue, alert but quiet, eyes sharp on her back. I dropped the folded notice into my jacket pocket and let out a slow breath. She really didn't get it. My name's Nate Holloway. I was a firefighter for 16 years until my shoulder gave out after a collapse rescue. These days, I do light work at the nearby firehouse, keep the house in shape, and take care of Tango, the last living connection to my brother Jamie. Jamie didn't make it home from his third tour. His convoy hit an IED in Helmand Province, and Tango, his assigned K-9, survived the blast with shrapnel in his hind leg. Army protocol would have retired him quietly to a base kennel, but Jamie had filled out the paperwork in advance, just in case. His final request, if I go, Tango goes home. So I brought him here, to the house Jamie and I inherited from our parents, the place we rebuilt with our own hands after Dad passed. This porch, this land, the magnolia tree Mom planted before she got sick, it all holds history. Tango wasn't just a dog anymore. He was memory. He was present. He still knew the layout of the house. He slept at Jamie's side of the bed for months after I brought him back, waiting for a shadow that never walked through the door. And now, Karen Beckley, with her laminated nameplates and fake concern for community safety, thought she could erase that? Her new campaign was dressed up like all good power plays. Concerned language, procedural memos, veiled threats. It started with a survey about pet noise levels, then moved to restrictions on breeds, then leash length. Then came the Community Health Initiative, banning dogs from green spaces. And now this, blanket removal of all dogs from Ridgegate Greens. Except it wasn't just any dog she was targeting. Tango didn't bark. He didn't run wild. He was trained to detect explosives and alert silently. His presence had kept entire units alive. Karen called him a potential liability. I called him a hero. When she handed me that notice, she probably expected outrage, maybe panic. Instead, I gave her stillness, because behind that stillness was a wall she hadn't run into yet. She didn't know Caleb was back in state, my younger brother, the quiet one, the one who stopped telling war stories a long time ago, the one people assumed was broken until they saw him operate under pressure like a chess grandmaster with a loaded rifle. Karen didn't know that I'd already seen HOA bylaws used like weapons, and how easy it was to turn them back with the right kind of pressure. I wasn't looking for a fight. I never am. But I don't lose the ones I choose. Tango nudged my knee with his nose. I scratched behind his ears absently and looked out over the central lawn, the place where Jamie used to throw a ball under the magnolia's shade every Sunday morning, where he trained Tango to respond to whistle commands. The brass whistle still hangs by the back door. I haven't touched it since the funeral, but I might soon. Because this wasn't about noise complaints or leash lengths. It was about control. And they were about to learn that some things, some legacies, don't bend to committee votes, not while I'm still standing. The day after Karen handed me the violation notice, the HOA bulletin board at Ridgegate Park lit up like a declaration of war. New pet policy proposal, it read, in bold red font. Below it, a laminated sheet outlined the bylaw amendment in passive, sterilized language. To preserve safety and cleanliness, Ridgegate Greens will phase out all domestic canine ownership over the next 60 days. It was signed by Karen Beckley, President, Marcus Hensley, Vice President, and, notably, Martin Reyes, Treasurer. I stood in front of it as a few other residents slowed to read. One couple, young, probably just moved in, kept their distance, clutching their toddler while their beagle wagged beside them, oblivious. The mom muttered, "They can't be serious." And her husband gave a half laugh that didn't sound convinced. "They are," I said, not looking away from the board. "It starts with a policy, then comes the enforcement." The husband glanced at me. "I thought they couldn't do that. You know, ban dogs outright." "They can't. But they'll do it anyway, see who pushes back, and hope most people fold." He looked down at the beagle, then back at the notice. The paper was laminated, sealed, and smug. Back at home, I found another citation taped to my mailbox. This one accused Tango of being a disturbance to the peace during non-designated hours. Tango hadn't made a sound. He didn't bark unless ordered to. He didn't roam. He didn't even move without a whistle or gesture. He wasn't a dog to them. He was a symbol of defiance, of something they didn't control. And it wasn't just me anymore. Later that evening, I walked the trail behind the clubhouse, where the older section of Ridgegate curved past the lake. I passed by the Lennox house. Ms. Lennox, 82, walked her Shih Tzu Daisy every morning like clockwork. Except now, her windows were dark. The porch was empty. Her neighbor, Arjun, a quiet software engineer I'd spoken to a few times, was sitting on his stoop with a laptop balanced on one knee. He waved. "They made her leave," he said, not unkindly. "Not officially, but she got 3 citations in 5 days. Said it wasn't worth the stress anymore." "She sold her house?" I asked. "Below market," he said. "Quick sale, cash offer." I looked out toward the green. "Same story with the Russos," he added, "and the Hendersons. Anyone with an older dog? 3 families, quiet exits, unchallenged removals. Karen's plan wasn't just theory, it was already working. The pattern was sharp, precise. Create pressure, remove resistance, isolate the defiant. At the firehouse, I'd seen structures fail 1 weak beam at a time. This was no different. The HOA wasn't toppling the community in one blow. It was soft demolition, controlled collapse. I stopped by the East Cul-de-sac on my way back. That's where the Mansfields lived, high school sweethearts with twin boys and a yellow lab named Hopper. The boys used to ride him like a pony when they were smaller. Hopper was gone. I knocked. Shannon opened the door, shadows under her eyes. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded too fast. "Yeah, just tired. We rehomed Hopper with my sister in Asheville. No choice?" Her mouth trembled for half a second, then she forced a smile. "Better than getting fined every week." I didn't say anything, just gave a slow nod and turned to go. The message was clear. People were scared. Ridgegate Greens had become a place where fear was louder than dogs. When I got home, I found Tango curled near the base of the magnolia, right beneath the spot where Jamie used to hang the bird feeders. The wind rustled the lower branches. Fall hadn't fully touched them yet, but I could feel the season shifting. I sat beside him and looked up through the leaves. The sky was orange and quiet. They thought they were wearing us down, but all they'd done was show me how far they'd go. I wasn't going to be next. The next HOA meeting was held in the Ridgegate Clubhouse, just past sunset. They always scheduled these gatherings at odd hours, late enough to discourage attendance, early enough to avoid conflict with the board's personal routines. It was strategic, predictable, but I showed up anyway. The front row was empty, the folding chairs stiff and too close together. I chose a spot near the back, close to the windows where the air didn't feel so choked with pretense. Most of the seats were filled with familiar faces, homeowners, retired couples, and a few new families trying to keep their heads down. They all looked tired, not from the hour, from the pattern. Karen sat dead center at the long table up front, wearing her signature cranberry, blazer like it was armor. On her right was Marcus Hensley, chin tucked like he was already bracing for blowback. And at her left, barely looking up from the papers in his lap, was Martin Reyes. Martin and I weren't close, but we'd exchanged enough neighborly nods over the years to know which lawnmower the other used. He was mid-40s, glasses always slightly crooked, and the kind of guy who hated confrontation so much he practically vibrated with discomfort every time someone raised their voice. He was the treasurer, numbers guy, kept receipts for everything, quiet, precise, and tonight he looked wrecked. Karen opened the meeting with that syrupy tone she used whenever she wanted to pretend she cared. "Thank you all for coming. I know change can feel sudden, but we believe this new pet policy is a vital step in preserving Ridgegate's quality of life." I tuned most of it out. I'd heard the script before. I watched faces instead. Some nodded, some scowled, most just sat still. But Martin didn't look up once. He fidgeted with his pen, tapped it against the folder in front of him, then stopped, then started again. His knee bounced under the table. His fingers pressed against his temple like the words on the page were physically painful. When Karen called for questions, no one moved, until I stood. "Question for the board," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Can you clarify the insurance liability implications of removing federally recognized service animals from the community?" Karen blinked. "I don't believe that's—" "It is," I interrupted, still steady. "Especially since your notice didn't distinguish between pets and classified canines. Just wondering if our HOA insurance provider has weighed in on that." That was when Martin looked up. His eyes met mine for a beat too long. He knew exactly what I was implying, and it rattled him. Karen spoke again, sharper now. "We've consulted general legal guidance, and our position is firm. The board will not be engaging in case-by-case exceptions." Martin shifted in his seat. His mouth twitched like he wanted to say something. He didn't. After the meeting ended, most people filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact, clutching their copies of the updated bylaw like verdicts. But Martin lingered. I stayed seated, pretending to check something on my phone. Eventually, he walked past me, slower than necessary. I didn't look up. "You didn't hear this from me," he muttered. I kept my voice low. "Then I didn't. They're pushing the insurance angle backward, saying dogs increase premiums. It's not true, but it's their excuse, and they're hiding it behind community wellness." "Who's they?" He paused, exhaled. "Karen, and Marcus now. She's pressuring votes, threatening to investigate reimbursements, mileage logs, whatever she can twist. People are scared. He stopped himself. I looked up. "You're what?" His lips pressed into a line. "I'm trying not to lose my house." There it was, the weight of it. Fear dressed in quiet compliance. I nodded once. "I get it." He hesitated, then added, "I've still got Baxter. You know that, right?" I did. His mutt, half shepherd, half hound, always watching from the upstairs window. He stepped away before I could reply. But the tremble in his hand when he'd gripped his folder told me everything. Martin was caught between the bylaws and his conscience, and sooner or later, he'd have to choose a side. And when he did, I'd be ready. 3 days later, the next notice came. This time it wasn't taped to my door. It was hand-delivered by a uniformed courier. Legal-style envelope. Certified delivery. No HOA logo this time. Just a bold title across the top. Cease and desist. Unlawful possession of restricted animal. I didn't even make it to the second paragraph before my chest tightened. They weren't just issuing fines anymore. They were escalating to legal threats. I sat at the kitchen table, Tango curled up at my feet, the folded envelope beside my coffee mug like a slow-burning fuse. I read the rest twice. The language had changed, more aggressive, more targeted. Karen had moved from citations to alleged violation of community safety protocols. They referenced complaints that didn't exist, incidents that had never happened, and right there, in block text near the bottom, failure to comply may result in legal action, enforcement liens, or further HOA remedies as permitted by Ridgegate Greens, Covenant Section 12C. It was total overreach, but that didn't mean it wasn't dangerous. HOAs love to count on apathy. If you didn't push back hard and fast, they took silence as submission. I glanced over at the side door. The whistle Jamie used still hung on its rusted hook, untouched. The fact that Tango hadn't even needed to be called to attention as the letter arrived said enough. He was tracking it. He felt the tension in the air, same as I did. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing the HOA documents, not the summaries they handed out at meetings, but the original filing records I kept from when our parents first moved here. I remembered Dad fighting off a landscaping fine when we were kids. He'd taught me to never trust the highlighted versions they distributed in binders. Always read the footnotes. There it was. paragraph buried in the original Ridgegate Charter, dated back to 1997. No bylaw amendment may contradict or supersede state or federal protections afforded to residents under ADA compliance service. Animals weren't just allowed, they were explicitly protected. And Tango's military designation, though technically retired, gave him documentation under a broader category of protected service animals. I opened the file cabinet where I'd stored Jamie's Army records, not to use them, not yet, just to remember what I had. Proof of Tango's service, deployment logs, clearance status, transfer orders assigning him to Jamie and noting his eligibility for family custody upon handler death. I wasn't bluffing, not anymore. Later that evening, I walked the long loop around Ridgegate's eastern boundary. A winding sidewalk traced the back of the development, cutting behind a line of hedges Karen always insisted were community maintained, but only ever watered when it rained. As I turned the bend near Lot 46, I spotted Marcus, HOA Vice President, standing on his driveway, talking into his phone. I slowed, staying out of view. His voice wasn't loud, but I caught enough. "We have to act now, or people are going to realize it's unenforceable. No, Karen doesn't care. She wants him gone before the next board cycle. Yeah, the dog guy, Holloway." I didn't move, didn't breathe, unenforceable. So they knew. They were bluffing, swinging hard and hoping I'd break first. Karen wanted me out before the next vote, before the residents realized she was faking the strength of her position. That meant timing mattered. It also meant pressure could go both ways. I waited until Marcus disappeared inside before I moved, kept my pace steady. Took the long route back, past the tree line, where the sounds of Ridgegate faded and the crunch of gravel beneath my boots reminded me of fire trails and tactical drills Jamie used to run with Caleb in the woods behind our old place. I sent a text that night, short, simple. "You still know that risk guy in Durham?" Caleb responded 5 minutes later. "Yeah. Want me to call him?" I stared at the screen for a long second, then typed, "We've got a liability problem to exploit." Because if they were willing to bluff, I was willing to bet. And my hand was just getting started. Caleb arrived the next morning, without calling first. I heard the familiar rumble of his truck tires crunching over the gravel. He parked half off the driveway, like always, and stepped out wearing boots, a gray windbreaker, and that same unreadable expression he used to wear before a live op. He didn't knock, just let himself in and nodded at Tango, who lifted his head once and then settled again. "You got the notice?" he asked, tossing his keys on the counter. "Hand delivered," I said. "Cease and desist. Karen's pushing it hard now." He nodded, jaw clenched. "And the vice president knows it's hollow." Caught him saying it on the phone, didn't see me listening. Caleb sat across from me at the kitchen table. He pulled a slim black folder from his jacket and slid it forward. Inside were printouts, email headers, legal briefs, excerpts from North Carolina, HOA liability cases, and one name underlined, James Royston, Certified Risk Assessor, Durham. "He's the guy," Caleb said. "Worked with us on a few base housing audits. Quiet, smart, thorough. I sent him everything last night. HOAs exposed." I scanned the packet while Caleb talked. "Karen's policy violates ADA and FHA protections for both service and emotional support animals," he said. "But more importantly, she's issuing citations without legal authority. The board's supposed to vote on policy enforcement, but she's bypassing that." "She'll say the board approved it," I replied. "She can say whatever she wants, unless it's on record with a time-stamped vote. It won't hold in court, or with their insurance carrier." That's where it started to click. Karen wasn't just making noise, she was stacking risk. Every dog she forced out, every citation she issued without due process, every attempt to override federal protections. She was building liability the HOA's insurance provider had no idea existed. And Caleb had already laid the foundation. "Royston's drawing up a formal report," he continued. "We're not filing anything yet, but once it's in their hands, they'll either cancel the HOA's coverage or demand policy rewrites." My stomach settled for the first time in weeks. Not because the threat was gone, but because we finally had the shape of it, the exposed flank. "How long till he's done?" I asked. 3 days, tops," Caleb said. He's pulling claim history for other HOAs with similar violations. Once we show that pattern, it's not just theoretical exposure, it's precedent. I stood and moved to the back door, pushing it open. The wind stirred the magnolia's lower branches. The air smelled like fall now, crisp, sharp. The kind of scent Jamie used to swear made him feel more awake than the coffee ever could. Tango padded up beside me. His gait was stiff but steady. "He's not going anywhere," I said. Not to Caleb, just to the wind, to the roots under the porch, to Jamie, wherever he was. They're not going to bury his legacy under some fake safety ordinance. Caleb joined me, quiet. "Karen's pressing hard because she knows her time's short," he said. "Board elections are coming up. She wants you gone before then. If you stay, you become the symbol, the one who fought back. She wants to make an example. So let's give her one," he said. Later that afternoon, I called Arjun from 2 blocks over, asked him to meet me at the green. He showed up with his laptop bag slung over one shoulder and a look that said he didn't quite believe things could change. I showed him the packet Caleb brought. "Wait, this is real?" he said. "This could actually shut the policy down, strip their protection, flip the liability." He stared at the papers, eyes scanning the highlighted sections, and then he nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm in." We stood in silence for a while, watching a pair of kids chase each other through the grass where the dog park used to be. No dogs anymore. Just ghosts of freedom. But not for long. Karen had bet that fear would do her work for her. She forgot what happened when brothers stand shoulder to shoulder. 2 days later, the emails started. Anonymous at first. Screen names like Concerned Neighbor. 23 and Ridgegate parent began posting on the HOA portal forum. Complaints about barking dogs, unauthorized animal waste, claims of leash aggression, the usual manufactured hysteria. Only this time, the tone was coordinated, too polished to be random gripes. Caleb and I knew exactly what it was. Karen was laying groundwork, creating digital evidence to justify what she was about to do next. That afternoon, I found the final straw waiting in my mailbox. A printed image, grainy and deliberately blurred, of what was supposed to be Tango baring his teeth near a child. The caption underneath read, "Multiple resident reports. Immediate safety concern." There was no date, no source, no timestamp. Just a warning stapled to another citation. My jaw tightened. I walked straight inside, pulled Jamie's deployment binder from the cabinet, and took out Tango's behavioral records. 3 tours, no aggression incidents, certified passive alert dog. Evaluated by 2 separate handlers after Jamie's death. He didn't even growl in his sleep. I laid the fake photo beside those records and took a long breath. That's when the weight of it all crashed down harder than before. This wasn't just a violation, it was character assassination. Not of me, of Tango, of Jamie. They couldn't tarnish a war hero, so they'd come for his dog. Caleb came in through the back door, tossing his phone on the counter. "Royston's finished the draft. He's couriering the hard copy tomorrow morning. It's tight. Insurance implications, legal precedent, ADA case law, all tied to Karen's enforcement pattern." I didn't speak right away, just handed him the printed photo. He stared at it for a beat, then longer. "Where the hell did she get this?" he muttered. "She didn't. I don't think it's real." "You're saying she fabricated this?" "I'm saying she's willing to do anything. And we're past citations now. She's setting up for removal." He didn't argue, just ran a hand down his face, the way he used to after 48-hour ops. "She wants Tango gone before the insurance letter lands," I said. "She's accelerating." Caleb looked toward the door. "Then we accelerate too." That night, I sat in the garage with the side door cracked open. Tango lay beside me on the concrete, tail twitching in his sleep. I polished the brass whistle with a soft cloth, something I hadn't done in over a year. Jamie used to say, "Don't touch the whistle unless you're ready to follow through." I wasn't just ready, I was done waiting. The next morning, I put on my department jacket, still had the old patch from the station sewn into the arm, and walked to Martin, Reyes's house. He answered on the 3rd knock, eyes tired, shirt wrinkled. Baxter's bark came muffled from upstairs. "We need to talk," I said. He looked down the street, then back at me. "Is it about the photo?" "She's building a false record, and you're the treasurer signing off on it." I haven't signed anything since the last policy meeting, he said fast. Karen started drafting memos without board review. She says she's just filing them under executive discretion. That's not legal, and you know it. He leaned against the frame like the door was holding him up. I didn't agree to this. Then don't be the fall guy when this collapses. I'm giving you one chance, Martin. Come clean, and I'll make sure your name's left out of what's coming. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked back inside his house, and I saw it again. That flicker of fear, followed by something else. Regret. I didn't want this, he said. But Karen said if I spoke up, she'd report Baxter as an unlicensed emotional support animal. She's bluffing, and you're letting her hold your dog hostage. He dropped his eyes. You're right. I nodded once. Then do something about it. I left him standing there, barefoot on his welcome mat, hands shaking. I didn't know if he'd follow through, but I knew the guilt had landed. That crack in his armor was widening. Back home, I stood beneath the magnolia tree as the wind tugged at its thinning branches. It was time to take the fight public, time to use what Caleb and Royston had built, because if they were willing to lie this boldly, then they'd better be ready to face the truth at full volume. Martin showed up at my door just after dusk. No text, no call, just a hesitant knock, 3 sharp raps, like someone who was afraid he'd lose his nerve if he waited too long. I opened the door. He didn't speak at first. His eyes darted past me like he was checking if anyone had seen him come. Then he stepped inside, pulling a folded manila envelope from under his jacket. She's going to notice I took this, he muttered, but I couldn't let her keep it buried. He handed it to me without ceremony. His hand trembled. I didn't ask if he was sure. Inside were 4 printed pages. HOA internal communications on official letterhead. Each email was marked confidential, board review only. Karen's name was on everyone. The first was dated a month ago. The last, 3 days prior. I scanned the highlights. Initiate phase-out enforcement early. Target high-visibility owners with fabricated reports if necessary. Begin building narrative on aggressive behavior. Use any existing animal complaints as template. Reyes, keep insurance and legal channels out of this until the policy is in effect. We don't need external eyes on this yet. My hands curled tight around the pages. You were on copy for all of this? I asked. He nodded. Didn't reply, didn't co-sign, but I didn't object either. He looked down. I thought if I stayed quiet, I could write it out. You've got your name on 3 finance memos tied to citations, I said. Karen used them to justify budget allocations for enforcement. His shoulders sagged. I know. That's why I brought the originals. If this hits legal review, I want it clear I didn't write any of the policy wording. He pulled a USB from his coat pocket. All of it's backed up here, time-stamped, unedited. He hesitated. I copied her local drive during the last board meeting. I think she suspects. I took the drive. This gives us everything we need. She's going to retaliate, he said quietly. She already has, to 4 families, Ms. Lennox, the Russos, the Mansfields, and me. I held up the last page, the one where she instructed Marcus to move forward on character framing to discredit high-resistance owners. Martin's face drained. She called it that? She called it strategy. I stared at him. You're still on the board. You know the vote schedule? Next Friday. It's the quarterly, open to the entire community. He paused. If enough people show up, motions can be reversed. I nodded. We're going to make sure they show. He rubbed his face like it physically hurt to say the next part. I'll vote against her. I'll make it public. But you have to move fast. She's trying to get insurance renewal signed early, to freeze in the policy changes before they're challenged. She won't get that far. He gave a half nod, half prayer, then turned toward the door. Before he stepped out, I said, Baxter's still safe? Martin looked back. He sleeps under the bed now, like he knows what's coming. That hit harder than I expected. When he left, Caleb emerged from the hallway. We've got it, he said, already unrolling the home printer. We pair this with Royston's report, and it's not just civil liability, it's fraud, policy manipulation, misappropriation of funds, ADA exposure. If the insurance company sees this, they'll have no choice but to act. I set the USB down next to Royston's sealed report. We're going to prep everything, packet the evidence, have it in every homeowner's hands before the vote. We'll need allies, Caleb said. Silent ones, loud ones, doesn't matter. Karen's built her authority on fear and fake policy. We break both. I'll start with the old families, I said. The ones who remember the Ridgegate Charter before she rewrote it in committee meetings. He nodded. I'll handle the legal formatting and timelines. We give them facts and friction. As he worked, I moved to the back door. The sky was fading blue, low clouds dragging across the horizon. I gave a soft whistle. Jamie's. Tone for come home. Tango padded over from beneath the magnolia tree, his gait steady, head high. I crouched and met his eyes. It's happening. We're not backing down. He pressed his head into my palm like he understood every word. This wasn't just resistance anymore. It was a counteroffensive. Caleb worked like a man building a war plan. By sunrise, he had Royston's liability assessment laid out across the dining table, page by page, each one paired with the matching HOA communications Martin had handed over. He labeled everything with military precision, red tags for ADA violations, blue for internal misconduct, yellow for direct insurance risk. You're going to present this at the board vote, he said, eyes flicking between the documents. But we're not waiting for that meeting to land a blow. We're getting this into the insurer's hands first. He pointed to the final section of Royston's report, a 5-page summary detailing how Ridgegate's current enforcement policies created increased exposure to lawsuit under federal disability protections and materially misrepresented risk status to underwriters. Karen's house of cards, Caleb muttered, built on silence, backed by fake complaints, and blind to the consequences. We scanned the HOA's original charter, cross-referenced it with the state-level requirements for board transparency and insurance renewal disclosures. Caleb highlighted a section on annual coverage compliance. Policy terms must reflect accurate current conditions, and the board must report changes in risk to the carrier prior to renewal. Karen hadn't done that. In fact, she'd deliberately hidden her enforcement plan while applying for the next policy cycle. We caught her lying, not just to us, but to the people who held the HOA's legal and financial protection. Caleb drafted the cover letter himself, sharp, surgical, and grounded in precedent. No emotion, no threats. Just a tight report addressed to Ridgegate's insurer and the city's HOA regulatory contact, citing non-disclosure of risk, improper policy amendments, and exposure to ADA litigation. It read like a formal warning before a cancellation, which, if we timed it right, was exactly what it would become. By mid-afternoon, we'd sent physical and digital copies to both. Signature required, Step 1, complete. Step 2 meant preparing the packet for the homeowners, 23 households still active, at least 15 of them with pets, and 5 with known grievances against Karen. I pulled together custom folders. Inside each, a summary of the proposed bylaw changes, copies of the internal emails, and the insurance report in plain language. Make it easy to understand, Caleb had said. People won't fight what they don't fully grasp, so show them how they're next. We added a simple one-sheet explainer. If you've ever received a citation, you've been exposed to financial risk. If this policy passes, your insurance could be affected. If you do nothing, your silence becomes her weapon. We kept names out of it, just facts, cause, and consequence. By nightfall, I stood in the entryway with 23 sealed folders in my arms, staring at the place where Jamie's boots used to sit. He'd have handled this faster, cleaner, but probably with less patience. Tango nudged my leg, then sat beside me like he knew we were about to do something important. "You ready for a walk?" I asked. His tail thumped once. We delivered the first batch house by house, sticking to neighbors I trusted. Arjun's place, Ms. Lennox's old house, now owned by a young couple with a pit mix they kept hidden behind curtains. The Carmichaels, who'd already received 2 citations for their corgis barking. One by one, I left the packet with a quiet explanation. You're not alone, and you don't have to stay silent. Some looked skeptical, most looked relieved. A few asked how they could help. By the end of the night, I'd handed out 19, 4 to go. I got home, dropped the remaining folders on the table, and found Caleb staring at his phone. "They saw it," he said without looking up. Who? The insurance representative and the city. Opened the emails within the hour. One flagged it for legal review. That hit like a silent detonation. No sirens, just pressure, sudden and electric. Karen hadn't seen it yet, but the trap was already in motion. One false step now, and the ground would give way beneath her. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were setting the pace. By sunrise, Ridgegate Greens was humming beneath its surface. Karen hadn't responded yet. No public statements, no counterposts on the HOA portal. But silence from her wasn't peace. It was calculation. She was stalling, likely waiting for the insurance renewal to go through before reacting. Which meant we had a window, and we were going to fill it. Caleb had mapped the entire neighborhood. Houses with dogs, those who'd recently moved in, families who hadn't spoken up publicly, but had everything to lose if Karen's policy passed. The next step wasn't legal, it was community. We needed numbers at the vote. A silent majority was still a majority, but only if it showed up. We need to organize, I told Arjun that morning as we stood outside the bakery near the Ridgegate entrance. Not just in whispers, people have to be willing to stand up. He nodded, tapping through the HOA forum on his phone. The post is still pinned, no retraction, no apology, but some comments are turning, quiet ones, asking if Karen can actually enforce any of this. Good, I said. We're going to make sure they ask louder. We printed flyers that afternoon. Not glossy, not dramatic, just plain text, straight facts. HOA board vote, Friday at 6 p.m. Clubhouse vote no on the dog ban. Your attendance. Your voice no shows. Karen wins. We walked the streets with Tango at my side, handing them out, sliding them into mailboxes, taping them beside community boards. Some neighbors thanked me, others avoided eye contact. A few whispered. Finally, Caleb worked the background while I canvassed. He called Royston again, asking for confirmation the report had been received and acknowledged. The response came back clear, under active legal review. Response pending. Then came the real win. A letter, not from Karen, from Ridgegate's insurance carrier, delivered to the HOA board inbox with a subject line no president ever wanted to see. Policy review, suspension pending compliance inquiry. Caleb read the first 2 lines aloud while I packed up more flyers. Due to recently submitted third-party risk analysis and related board correspondence, your current liability renewal is suspended pending further clarification and board response. Karen's power wasn't just cracking, it was bleeding out in front of her. Suspension meant no legal coverage for policy enforcement, no shield, no fallback if someone sued under ADA. If she pushed her dog ban now, it would expose the HOA directly, and she knew it. By evening, the first tremor came. Martin texted, "Emergency board meeting. Karen's panicking. Wants a full review before Friday." I asked, "You going?" His response came fast. "Yes, but I'm voting to delay the vote, and I'll ask to rescind enforcement notices." I showed the message to Caleb. "We're turning the board itself." He didn't smile, just circled a new name on his planning sheet. "Next target, Marcus." I frowned. "You think he'll flip?" "Not publicly," Caleb said. "But if we isolate him, show him the fallout, he might back down enough to stall Karen's moves." That night, I dropped a sealed envelope on Marcus's porch, his personal copy of the insurance suspension letter, the ADA violation summary, and Martin's memo timestamps. No signature, just facts. Let him sit with that. Inside, I sat down across from Caleb. Tango laid between us, head on his paws, watching like he understood every beat of this silent campaign. "This place used to be different," I said quietly. "Jamie and I grew up running these sidewalks barefoot. The only rule was, don't break a window. Now people are afraid to let their dogs pee on the wrong lawn." Caleb looked toward the window. "We're changing that, not with shouting, with pressure." He was right. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. And we were almost ready. The wind picked up the morning of the vote, leaves scattered across the sidewalks, swirling around the bases of the newly installed "No pet access beyond this point" signs Karen had ordered last week. Funny, those signs hadn't gone through any formal board approval. They just showed up one day. Staked in with authority, like the neighborhood belonged to her, Today, she'd find out otherwise. I spent the morning walking the loop around Ridgegate with Tango. Not for show, he needed the movement. But I won't pretend the sight of us didn't catch eyes. Each neighbor I passed gave a nod, some tentative, some defiant. A few reached out quietly to say they'd be at the meeting. One woman, clutching her leash and shaking hands, whispered, "We were going to rehome her if this passed." I looked down at her golden retriever, tail tucked, body pressed against her leg. "You won't have to," I said. By noon, the packet folders were stacked on the kitchen table, each with Royston's finalized risk report, the insurance suspension notice, and the internal HOA emails Martin had provided. We printed 25 copies, enough for every household and each board member. I slid one extra into my jacket, Karen's. Caleb had already arranged for 2 neighbors to record the meeting. Nothing secret, just phones set up on tripods with permission from the board, as long as it didn't interrupt business. Transparency was legal. Karen's fear of it didn't matter. We arrived at the Ridgegate Clubhouse at 5:45 p.m. 15 minutes early. The room was already half full. By 6:05, it was standing room only. I stood near the front, folder in hand, Tango leashed calmly beside me. He didn't bark, didn't pace, just sat, patient, as if sensing the moment wasn't about noise, it was about presence. Karen walked in at 6:08, flanked by Marcus and a visibly paler Martin. She saw Tango first, then me. Her face didn't flinch, but I caught the tightness in her jaw as she took her seat. She opened the meeting with forced calm. "Thank you all for coming to this important vote. We understand emotions are high, but the board's responsibility is to preserve safety, order, and the quality of Ridgegate greens." I raised my hand before she could get further. She frowned. "Mr. Holloway, we haven't yet opened—" "This concerns the vote directly," I said, "and I believe every homeowner here has a right to informed consent before casting it." I walked to the front table and placed a folder in front of each board member, then turned to the audience, holding the last one up. "What you're about to vote on isn't a policy, it's a legal hazard. This," I said, tapping the cover, "is a formal risk report submitted to Ridgegate's insurer. It outlines multiple violations of federal ADA guidelines tied directly to the proposed dog ban, as well as internal communications showing board misconduct in hiding that risk." Karen tried to interrupt. "This is out of—" "Your insurer doesn't think so," I said, turning and placing her copy firmly in front of her. "They've already suspended Ridgegate's renewal pending further review. If this vote goes forward, every homeowner here could be left uncovered in the event of litigation." The room shifted. Audible gasps, papers being flipped open, heads turning. Martin cleared his throat. Voice shaking, he said, "I move to suspend this vote indefinitely, pending legal and financial review." Silence. Karen didn't blink. "That's not a proper motion." "It is," Martin snapped, louder than I'd ever heard him. "And I second it myself. I won't be party to insurance fraud." Karen stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "This is a manipulation. This is harassment." Caleb stepped forward, voice cold. "No, it's accountability, and we've recorded everything." Marcus, pale and quiet, finally spoke. "Maybe it's time we pause." Karen turned to him in disbelief. "You too?" He didn't answer, didn't have to. I stepped back beside Tango as the room broke into murmurs, rising and falling like surf. Karen stood frozen in the middle of it, folder unopened. We hadn't won yet, but she was no longer in control. The room was louder than I'd ever heard it. Not yelling, just voices overlapping, rapid, unsettled, all pointed in the same direction. People weren't whispering about Karen anymore. They were questioning her, directly. Karen stood behind the folding table at the front of the clubhouse like the furniture might shield her. The other board members had gone quiet, and Martin looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. But it was Marcus who broke the deadlock. He leaned toward the microphone and tapped it once. "Motion's been made to suspend the vote pending legal review," he said, clearing his throat. "I second." Karen's face twitched. "We can't just stop the process." "Yes, we can," Martin said. "Section 7B of the Charter allows emergency procedural halts if legal exposure is presented. I checked this morning." He glanced at me, a small nod of acknowledgement. "And it is." Karen stepped forward, hands gripping the table. "This is all fabricated. Mr. Holloway has a personal vendetta. He's trying to undermine community safety." I raised my voice, calm but steady. The insurer doesn't think it's fabricated. Gasps rippled across the room as Caleb stepped forward and placed a printed copy of the suspension notice on the community projector. The text appeared on the screen behind Karen in bold black letters. Ridgegate policy renewal suspended pending investigation into potential misrepresentation of risk. One of the neighbors, a woman from the West Loop I didn't know well, stood up. "Are we uninsured right now?" Karen didn't answer. Another voice cut in. "Did you lie on the renewal forms?" And then another, "Why didn't we get to vote on the policy before you enforced it?" The tide had turned. Karen tried to regain control. "Let's not turn this into a witch hunt. These accusations are dangerous. We're trying to preserve the quality of Ridgegate." "You're trying to control it," Arjun said, standing near the back. "You made 3 families feel forced out. You intimidated people over pets. This isn't about safety. It's about power." The clubhouse fell silent again. I stepped forward, opening the final folder I'd kept sealed until now. "For those asking what this really cost us," I said, laying out photocopies of the false complaint emails. "Here's proof Karen coordinated fabricated dog aggression reports. Martin confirmed the timeline. She created a pattern where there was none, to justify enforcement." Karen's voice cracked. "You have no proof those were my words." Martin stood. "I do." He pulled out his copy of the USB. "Time-stamped, on the record. You typed them. You sent them. And you told me to stay quiet, or Baxter would be reviewed for violation." Gasps again. But this time, no one moved to stop him. Karen backed away from the table like the floor had shifted beneath her feet. "This is character assassination." "No," Martin said, shoulders straightening. "This is a reckoning." Marcus stood again, smoothing his tie like it gave him courage. "I move to call a special vote, tonight. Motion to remove Karen Beckley as HOA president, effective immediately, pending review." For a moment, no one spoke. Then a voice, Shannon Mansfield, rose from the center of the room. "I second." And just like that, the tide became a wave. Hands shot up. Neighbors who had once whispered in private now stood with their arms raised, voices clear. Caleb kept count. 14, 17, 23. Out of 25 homes represented, 23 voted to remove her. Karen stared out at the crowd, face frozen in something between rage and disbelief. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "No," I said, stepping forward with Tango at my side. "We regret not doing it sooner." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Tango shifted beside me, gaze steady, as if he too understood what had just changed. Karen slowly gathered her purse and walked out the front doors, her heels echoing off the tile, not a soul following her. Outside, dusk had fallen. Porch lights flickered on across Ridgegate Greens like the neighborhood was waking up after a long, choking sleep. We hadn't just stopped to vote. We'd reclaimed our voice. The next morning felt different. The sky over Ridgegate was the same soft gray it always was in late autumn, but the air didn't feel heavy anymore. No tension behind closed curtains, no whispers over fences, just quiet. Earned quiet. Tango and I walked the loop as we always did. No signs were missing, but they meant less now. The bylaws Karen fought to push through were frozen, pending full review. The insurer had confirmed it. Liability risk remained too high under her policies. The HOA's legal coverage would not be renewed unless all recent amendments were rescinded. And with Karen gone, the board had no choice but to comply. Martin stayed on as treasurer. He wasn't proud of how long it took him to act, but he acted when it counted. Marcus issued a statement acknowledging deep concern over internal procedures and called for a full transparency policy. Caleb drafted most of it for him, tight, professional, impossible to ignore. 3 days after the vote, the new community proposal passed. All existing pet citations were nullified. Emotional support and service animals were explicitly protected in the revised bylaws. No more hidden amendments, no more targeted enforcement. And Ridgegate got its green back. This afternoon, I stood beneath the magnolia tree in our yard, the one Mom planted when we were kids, the one Jamie watered every Sunday before his deployment. The wind shook the remaining leaves loose, scattering yellow over the grass. Tango waited patiently at the edge of the porch. I pulled the whistle from the hook by the door. It felt heavier than I remembered, not in weight, in meaning. I raised it to my lips and blew. The sound rang clear, 3 sharp notes. The old command for return, the one Jamie used in the field. Tango's ears perked. He bounded forward with more energy than I'd seen in weeks, crossing the lawn in a blur of muscle and memory. When he reached me, I dropped to one knee, pressed my forehead against his. "You're home," I whispered. And now, no one could take that from him again. Neighbors started gathering around the clubhouse later that evening. Not for a meeting, just a gathering. Kids ran through the grass. Dogs barked freely for the first time in months. Someone brought hot cider. Someone else rolled out folding chairs. No one needed permission. That was the point. Arjun joined me by the sidewalk, watching his neighbor's corgi chase leaves across the pavement. "You did it," he said. We all did. "No," I replied. "We just reminded them who this place belongs to." He looked over at Tango. Jamie would be proud. I didn't answer, just let the weight of that truth sit in my chest. Some legacies get written in stone, others walk beside you. We didn't just stop Karen, we reset Ridgegate. For Jamie, for Tango, for every neighbor who stayed silent, because they thought no one would fight beside them. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. We're not just telling stories anymore, we're building something they can't take.